One fateful afternoon, the day before Thanksgiving in 1971, on a flight from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington, the unthinkable happened. A nondescript man who went by the alias Dan Cooper hijacked the aircraft without any of the passengers knowing what was happening. Now, certainly, airline hijackings have been around about as long as commercial airlines have been. It was quite easy for those interested to seize control of an aircraft and its flight crew due to the fact that airports had almost no safety restrictions. You didn't even need an ID to book a ticket. Skyjackings, as they were called, were just something that happened every now and then. In fact, before the jacking of the infamous D.B. Cooper, as he's now known, the most recent skyjacking had happened 12 days prior, without the shutdown of any major airlines. So why is this particular incident one that will forever be remembered? Because it is the only hijacking that has ever happened in America without ever being solved. But that's not the only strange thing about this case. This flight was a very short one, only lasting about 30 minutes or so, and about 10 minutes after the bird was in the air, Cooper's plan commenced. After hailing down one of the air stewardesses who sat near him, Cooper discreetly handed her a small, folded note without saying a word. Now, assuming that the note was just a phone number from an overconfident businessman, air stewardess Florence Schaffner dropped it into her purse without opening it. Upon seeing this, Cooper leaned towards her and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." The contents of what the actual note said are unknown, because Cooper was smart enough to order the note be returned to him after the information was relayed to the rest of the flight crew. After reading the note, Schaffner was told to quietly sit next to him, when she then asked if she could see the bomb. Cooper flashed her a glimpse of the contents of his briefcase, which appeared to be a tangle of wires connected to 8 red cylinders attached to a large cylindrical battery. Then the stewardess realized that his threat was very real, or at least needed to be treated as though it was. Unlike other skyjackings at the time, which were mainly politically influenced, Cooper had a very strict list of demands. Now that's not all too rare, except for one part of it. The first thing he wanted was a ransom of $200,000, which by today's standards is just over $1.3 million. Here's where it gets tricky. The other demand was for 2 parachutes and 2 backup chutes. His terms were such as that the aforementioned items be delivered to him once the plane touched down in Seattle. After connecting with ground control at SeaTac, who then got in contact with the FBI, authorities decided it was in best interest to comply with Cooper's demands because if this threat of a bomb was real, they could not risk the lives of all the passengers aboard the plane. Cooper demanded that the aircraft not land until they were radioed that the ransom was prepared and waiting on the runway. Now here's where it gets even trickier. The authorities were running out of time. They needed everything to be ready before the plane was forced to land due to the amount of fuel it could carry. And due to the short amount of time, the airline was forced to pay the ransom money, and the FBI decided to pay it using $20 bills so it would make the overall amount heavier and harder to move or conceal. And with the small window of time, they were not able to mark all the bills, so they would be able to track them later in the future. As for the parachutes, they were almost out of luck until a local skydiving school came to their aid. Authorities could not risk giving rigged chutes to Cooper because of his demand for multiple. They assumed he was planning on jumping with the hostage in order to control the situation further. One thing the FBI never caught was that one of the chutes was a training chute and would not work for actual skydiving. Luckily for Cooper, that false chute never ended up on his back. After about 3 hours of circling around in the skies above Seattle, authorities radioed that the ransom items were ready and prepared, and the aircraft began its descent. By now, the passengers were well aware something was going on, as most of them were aware of the flight's very short time. This was all made clear once the plane touched down. Cooper had demanded the plane land at a deserted end of the runway and not be approached at all. When the small taxi truck carrying the parachutes and the duffel bag of money reached the plane, Schaffner was sent down the ramp to retrieve them and bring them back to Cooper, all while the FBI was standing by ready to take action if necessary. Being smarter than anticipated, Cooper had the cabin lights shut off as to make it difficult for, say, a sniper to see what's happening inside the aircraft. Upon inspecting the ransom and having it meet his expectations, Cooper released all of the passengers except for the flight crew. He was waiting for the refueling truck to reach the airplane and do its job before releasing them. Then the unexpected happened. The fuel truck had a malfunction and could not connect to the aircraft's fueling pipe. This is something Cooper assumed the FBI would use in order to stall, and he was right. Except the FBI had no hand in this whatsoever. This was just bad luck. They then sent over another truck that was nearby to complete the job, but unfortunately the truck did not hold enough fuel to finish filling the plane. Authorities, and most likely Cooper, were beginning to grow anxious. This was taking way too long. 3 fuel trucks, and a few hours later, the plane was ready for takeoff. However, Cooper's mind had changed quite a bit. Due to the refueling snafu, he decided to keep the crew and pilots hostage until the plane reached his desired destination of Reno, Nevada. At this point, after giving over the ransom as expected, the FBI had no choice but to comply further. With the rear ramp still open, Cooper demanded the plane take off as such. The pilots, however, told him due to the gas vapors in the air, they could not risk the ramp sparking against the ground, resulting in an explosion. Considering this, Cooper conceded with the pilots and demanded that one stewardess stay with him while the rest of the flight crew stay in the cockpit. With flight preparations ready, at 5:39 p.m., the plane took off once again. Upon takeoff, the Air Force dispatched 2 jets to follow the aircraft, one above it and one below it, just out of sight of Cooper in the cabin. They also dispatched a helicopter to tail the aircraft from below. But once again, Cooper was 1, or 2, steps ahead of the FBI. He directed the pilots to adjust the flaps to 15 degrees at 10,000 feet, which reduced the aircraft speed to 200 knots. Due to this exact measurement, the jets could not steadily follow the plane because they were too fast, and as for the helicopter, it was just too slow to keep up. All they could do was watch as Cooper flew away with his ransom and his hostages. A short time after ordering the stewardess rejoin the rest of the flight crew inside the cockpit, at approximately 8 p.m., the flight crew was alerted by a warning light that the rear ramp access had been activated. They offered to assist Cooper over the aircraft's PA system, but they were refused. The crew soon noticed a change in air pressure, meaning that the aft ramp had in fact been opened. At approximately 10:15 p.m., the aircraft landed at the Reno airport with its rear stairway still down. Immediately, authorities converged on the plane with no clue whether or not Cooper would still be inside. Upon thorough investigation of the entire plane, it seemed that Cooper had indeed jumped out of the plane with his money somewhere between Seattle and Reno. Over the next 47 years, authorities searched and searched, chasing every single possible lead, interviewing hundreds of people with the name Dan Cooper, but they never found anything concrete to suggest what actually happened to Cooper that fateful evening. Many think that he perished in the midst of the terrible storm he jumped into, while others like to believe he is still alive to this very day. One thing is certain, though. D.B. Cooper will go down in history as the only man to successfully execute an airplane hijacking and to get away with it. One fateful